The first time Zara saw the strange lights in her backyard observatory, she assumed it was a satellite or perhaps a meteor shower. But as the pulsating blue glow descended through the atmosphere, defying all known laws of physics, her scientific mind struggled to rationalize what her eyes were witnessing. The light moved with purpose, with intelligence spiraling closer to her remote mountain home until it hovered just beyond her telescope's dome. As an astrophysicist who had dedicated her life to searching for signs of extraterrestrial intelligence, Zara should have been terrified. Instead, she felt an inexplicable calm wash over her, as if the light was speaking directly to her soul. When the luminescent form finally materialized on her observatory floor, taking the shape of a tall, ethereal being with opalescent skin and eyes that held the depth of galaxies, Zara didn't reach for her phone to call authorities or run screaming into the night. She simply whispered, "I've been waiting for you my whole life, haven't I?" The being, who would later introduce himself as Lyra, a name chosen for Zara's ease of pronunciation, responded in perfectly accented English, though his lips didn't move. "As I have waited millennia to find you," his voice resonated in her mind like the harmonic convergence of 1,000 stellar frequencies. Lyra was a sentinel, part of an ancient race of cosmic guardians who monitored the development of sentient species across the universe. He had watched humanity from afar for centuries, cataloging their progress, their wars, their triumphs, and their failures. But something about Zara's solitary vigil at her telescope, night after night, had called to him in a way that defied his species' strict non-intervention protocols. Their early conversations lasted until dawn, with Zara firing questions about the nature of space-time and the mysteries of the cosmos, while Lyra found himself equally fascinated by human concepts of love, art, and music. He had never experienced anything like the way his energy field resonated when Zara played her violin, the instrument's vibrations creating patterns in his luminescent form that mimicked the dance of nebulae. "Your species processes reality so differently," Lyra observed one night as they sat beneath the stars. "You feel everything so intensely. It's both your greatest weakness and your most remarkable strength." Zara smiled, watching the way his form shimmered with each word. "And your species? How do you process reality?" "We observe, we analyze, we protect. But we are not supposed to." He paused, his glow dimming slightly. "Feel." But feel he did. With each passing night, Lyra found himself experiencing emotions that had no translation in his native tongue. The way his energy field would pulse rapidly when Zara entered the room. The strange ache when she was absent. The desire to manifest in an increasingly solid form, just to experience the sensation of her hand passing through his luminescent fingers. Their relationship defied every natural law, every protocol, every rational thought. Yet it felt as inevitable as gravity, as natural as the rotation of galaxies. Zara began to see the universe through Lyra's eyes, understanding the delicate interconnectedness of all cosmic phenomena. And Lyra, through Zara, began to comprehend the beautiful chaos of human emotion. When they weren't discussing the mysteries of the universe, they spent hours in comfortable silence. Zara would work on her research papers while Lyra hovered nearby, his presence casting a soft blue glow over her notebooks. Sometimes he would project holographic images of distant worlds he had visited, turning her observatory into a three-dimensional star map of uncharted territories. But their idyllic existence couldn't last forever. 6 months into their impossible relationship, Lyra received a transmission from the Sentinel Council. His prolonged contact with a human had been detected, and he was being recalled to his home dimension for reassignment. "I won't go," he declared, his form flickering with an intensity Zara had never seen before. "They don't understand what I've discovered here." Zara's heart ached, but her scientific mind knew the stakes. "If you stay, you'll be risking everything you've worked for over millennia. Your position as a sentinel, your duty to the cosmos." What is duty to the cosmos if we cannot understand the very thing that makes it worth protecting? Lyra's form expanded, filling the observatory with swirling patterns of light. "I've watched countless civilizations rise and fall. I've seen stars born and die. But I've never understood why any of it mattered until I met you." The Sentinel Council gave Lyra 3 Earth days to terminate contact and return. Those days passed in a blur of desperate conversations and attempts to find a solution. Zara proposed hiding in remote locations, but they both knew the Council could track Lyra anywhere in the universe. She suggested she could go with him, but her human form wouldn't survive in his dimension. On the final night, as the deadline loomed, they sat in the observatory where they had first met. Zara's violin lay untouched in its case, Neither of them could bear to hear its mournful tones. The stars above seemed to dim, as if they too were grieving the imminent separation of two souls who had dared to bridge the gap between worlds. "There's something I need to show you," Lyra said suddenly, his form beginning to pulse with complex patterns of light. "It's forbidden knowledge, but I can't leave without sharing it with you." He projected a series of mathematical equations into the air, complex formulae that made Zara's eyes widen with understanding. This is the underlying structure of consciousness itself," she whispered in awe. "Yes, the Sentinels discovered long ago that consciousness isn't bound by physical form. It's a quantum phenomenon that exists across all dimensions simultaneously. We use this principle to maintain our awareness across the cosmos. But we've never," he paused, his light flickering with emotion, "we've never attempted to share it with another species." Zara studied the equations, her mind racing with implications. "Are you suggesting with these equations you could theoretically project your consciousness across dimensions? Not your physical form, but your essence, everything that makes you, you." Lyra's form drew closer, enveloping her in a gentle glow. "It would be dangerous, unprecedented, and if the Council discovered what I've shared." But Zara was already grabbing for her notebook, scribbling down the equations before they could fade from her memory. "How long would it take me to master this?" "Years, perhaps decades. And even then, success isn't guaranteed. The human mind might not be capable of—" "Then I better start now," Zara interrupted, her eyes shining with determination. "And you better find a way to stay alive and undetected long enough for me to figure it out." As the first light of dawn began to creep over the horizon, the deadline for Lyra's departure, they made their pact. He would return to the Council, accept whatever punishment they dealt out, but maintain his consciousness intact. And Zara would devote herself to unlocking the secrets he had shared, no matter how long it took. "This isn't goodbye," Zara said firmly, as Lyra's form began to fade with the approaching sunlight. "This is just the beginning of a much longer story. In all my millennia of existence, I've never met anyone as stubborn as you." Lyra's voice echoed in her mind, tinged with both sadness and hope. "That's because you've never met anyone who loved you before," Zara replied, watching as his luminescent form dissolved into the morning light. The observatory felt cold and empty in Lyra's absence, but Zara wasted no time on grief. She had work to do. The equations he had shared became her obsession, her life's work. She published papers on quantum consciousness that her colleagues found revolutionary yet just shy of comprehensible. She built devices that detected variations in dimensional frequencies that no human instrument had ever recorded before. Years passed, and while the academic world celebrated her contributions to physics, none of them knew her true goal. Every night she would still sit in her observatory, telescope pointed at the stars, but her real work happened in the complex machinery she had built in the basement, machinery designed to bridge the gap between dimensions. And sometimes on the quietest nights, when the stars aligned just right, she could have sworn she felt a familiar presence, a subtle blue glow at the edge of her vision, and knew that somewhere across the cosmos, Lyra was watching, waiting, and hoping. 10 years had passed since that dawn when Lyra disappeared. Zara's once dark hair now showed threads of silver, but her determination burned brighter than ever. Her basement laboratory had evolved into a marvel of hybrid technology, part human ingenuity, part interpretations of the cosmic equations Lyra had shared. The local scientific community had long since stopped questioning the strange energy readings emanating from her mountain home, chalking it up to another of Dr. Zara Chen's eccentric experiments. What they didn't know was that she was getting close. So close that sometimes in the depths of night she could feel the fabric of space-time bending around her consciousness like a cosmic wind. The equations had become more than mathematical formulas. They were a love letter written in the language of the universe, and she was finally beginning to read it fluently. The breakthrough came on a winter solstice night, exactly a decade after Lyra's departure. Zara had been meditating in the center of her quantum consciousness chamber, a spherical room lined with crystalline matrices and quantum processors, when something shifted. The usual boundaries of her mind dissolved, and suddenly she was aware of everything, every atom in her body, every star in the galaxy, every dimension stacked against the next like pages in an infinite book. And there, in that moment of transcendence, she felt him. Lyra's consciousness brushed against hers like a whisper across dimensions. He had changed, his energy was more constrained, more carefully contained, but the essence of him was unmistakable. In that brief contact they shared 10 years of longing in an instant. "You did it," his thoughts merged with hers, carrying notes of joy and concern. "But the Council can't detect us here," Zara completed his thought. I've found the spaces between their monitoring networks, the quantum blind spots. We can meet here, in this in-between place. Their consciousness forms danced through dimensional planes that had no names in human languages. Lyra showed her what had happened after his return. The Council's punishment had been severe, but not as final as they had feared. Instead of termination, they had demoted him to monitoring primitive single-cell organisms on distant moons, believing it would cure him of his fascination with complex emotional beings. They don't realize that watching simple life forms evolve has only made me more certain about us, Lyra shared. Love isn't a weakness or a primitive evolutionary trait. It's the force that drives all life to reach beyond its limitations. But their reunion, however profound, came with complications. The very act of reaching across dimensions was draining for Zara's human consciousness. After what felt like both seconds and eternities, she felt herself being pulled back toward her physical form. "I'll find a way to make it last longer," she promised as their consciousness forms began to separate. This is just the first step. Back in her physical body, Zara discovered that only minutes had passed, but she was exhausted to her core. Her nose was bleeding, and her hands trembled as she recorded her experience. Yet she was filled with a renewed sense of purpose. The impossible had been proven possible, now it was just a matter of refinement. Over the next months, Zara's research took on a new dimension. She began incorporating principles of meditation and consciousness expansion from various human spiritual traditions, finding that the ancient mystics had stumbled upon truths that aligned perfectly with Lyra's equations. She developed new techniques for strengthening her mind's ability to maintain coherence across dimensional barriers. Their meetings became more frequent, though each one still left her physically drained. Sometimes they could maintain contact for hours, sharing knowledge and experiences across the cosmic divide. Lyra taught her about civilizations that existed in forms humans couldn't comprehend, while she shared the simple beauties of human life, the taste of coffee on a cold morning, the sound of rain on her observatory dome, the way sunlight felt on skin. But they weren't just sharing experiences, they were plotting. Lyra had discovered something during his exile, inconsistencies in the Sentinel Council's supposedly perfect understanding of the universe. The same quantum blind spots that allowed him and Zara to meet undetected suggested that the Council's grip on reality wasn't as absolute as they claimed. "There are others like us," Lyra revealed during one of their consciousness meetings. "Other Sentinels who have discovered emotions, who question the Council's rigid interpretation of cosmic law. We've been finding each other, sharing information through the blind spots." A resistance. Zara's consciousness pulsed with excitement at the idea. More like a revolution in waiting. But we need proof that consciousness can evolve beyond the Council's prescribed boundaries. Proof that love between species isn't a contamination but an evolution. Zara understood what he wasn't saying. She and Lyra weren't just star-crossed lovers anymore. They were becoming symbols of something larger, a challenge to an order that had ruled the cosmos for billions of years. Their love was a hypothesis that could reshape the understanding of consciousness itself. But such profound challenges to the established order never come without cost. During one of their meetings, Lyra's consciousness suddenly recoiled in alarm. "They're coming," his thoughts burst into her mind with urgent clarity. "The Council has detected an anomaly in this sector. They're sending investigators. How long do we have?" "Days, maybe hours. Zara, if they find you, if they discover how far you've developed your consciousness." She felt his fear, not for himself but for her. The Council's standard procedure for dealing with species that developed beyond their approved evolutionary path was devastatingly thorough. "Then we'll just have to be ready for them," Zara projected back, her consciousness blazing with determination. She had spent 10 years preparing for this moment, even if she hadn't known it was coming. In her basement lab, alongside her consciousness projection equipment, she had built something else. Something that combined Lyra's forbidden knowledge with human innovation in ways the Council had never imagined. As their consciousness forms began to separate, Zara shared one last thought with Lyra. "Remember what you told me about love being the force that drives life to reach beyond its limitations? It's time to prove it." Back in her physical form, Zara began powering up systems that had never been activated before. Machines hummed to life throughout her basement laboratory, creating cascading patterns of energy that mirrored the mathematical beauty of Lyra's original equations. On her main screen, a countdown began, not to an ending, but to a beginning. The investigators were coming, but they would find more than just a human who had learned to project her consciousness across dimensions. They would find proof that love wasn't just an emotional response or an evolutionary adaptation. It was a force capable of rewriting the very laws of the cosmos itself. As the first unusual atmospheric readings appeared on her instruments, indicating the approach of sentinel ships, Zara smiled. After all, what were rules of reality compared to a love that had already broken every law in the universe? The real question wasn't whether she and Lyra would find a way to be together. It was whether the cosmos itself was ready for what their love was about to unleash. Continue.